Sometimes you just have to stop, breathe it in, and what is your why? What is your hope? What is your motivation? Why do you do what you do? Don't make your pursuit of trying to be perfect your end game. Realize that you're always going to fuck up. But if you recover from that and you keep moving forward, take care of yourself. And beyond just, when you're not teaching or you're not on the road or you're not doing the gig, beyond just having your own meditation room when you're at home, when you're out on the road, watch what you eat, watch your substance consumption. You cannot take what we do personally. And that's a really, really hard thing to say and do, because so much of what we do is personal art.
Welcome to the Collaborative Resource Hub by Wellness Provisions. Our mission is to bridge the gap between mental health, wellness, and music, specifically rock and roll. I'm Amy McBride, owner of Wellness Provisions, the most badass wellness business. Wellness Provisions supplies rock and rollers with high-quality supplements. We give you a trustworthy place to go where you can essentially shop blindfolded. Our wellness kits were created out of a need to simplify your shopping experience and make it stress-free. You'll get the most effective nutrients in the least amount of bottles with the least trial and error. Immerse yourself in the Collaborative Resource Hub by going to our website, where you'll have access to helpful resources that can nudge you in the right direction. Let's inspire each other. If that guy did it, so can you. Find the Collaborative Resource Hub interviews on YouTube, all major podcast platforms, and subscribe to our newsletter to stay in the loop. Last but not least, my legal disclaimer: nothing in this interview or the Collaborative Resource Hub substitutes medical advice. Please connect with your GP if you need medical guidance. Doug, thank you so much for sitting down and having dogs with you as well. I'm excited for this chat.
Absolutely. Me too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you're a professional musician of 20 years, as well as an educator, and now you are on track to become a therapist. Why the change in course?
Well, there's 1,000 reasons, but the short version, being in the biz for 20 years, I'm sick and tired of lateral moves. I say this with no arrogance. I'm very, very proud of the work that I've done and the resume that I have as a result. However, none of it has really yielded any long-term sustainable bonus advancement. It's none of it.
Yeah.
So that's the number one thing, just being sick and tired of kind of spinning my wheels. The gig economy, it is what it is, unless you're the type of person that draws huge crowds at every single show. And I, quite frankly, don't know anybody that does that, least of all in Columbus. Unless you're doing that, or you're the kind of, college professor who can recruit, 15 students every single year, which even then, I don't know anyone that does that either. It's just same old all the time, every year, every month, every day, whatever. None of it gets you anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's the big number one reason. A more personal reason, while I love music and the dogs, Jesus, I absolutely love music. It's my heart, my soul, my art, my craft, my language. And while this is an amazing time to do music, as you can literally participate in whatever kind of music you want, literally, from a Gregorian chant choir. Yeah.
What genres do you, I guess, like, love the most, or do you often play the most or speak to you the most?
Ooh, that's a really tough question. If I'm forced to pick I might lean in the realm of like jazz fusion and prog rock.
Okay.
Just because those genres in and of themselves speak to such a wide throw of stuff within the genre. Yeah, if forced to pick one or two, that's probably where I would land. But at the same time, I love playing trombone in the middle of a Dvorak symphony or Beethoven 9. I love playing in a brass quintet. Playing in big bands is awesome. Hell, I even had a brief stint doing some vocal jazz stuff. That was kind of cool. So I don't know. There's plenty of cool stuff to do. For me, I feel like someone asked me this question before. It might have even been you. I don't remember. Um, but it's not about the genre or the band so much as it is the people, because I've played in some amazing groups doing some cool things with some absolute dicks, and it ruined the whole experience.
Right.
But at the same time, I've played, rough and tumble. Shoot, last summer I did this pickup gig for a wiffle ball tournament, with a couple of my friends, none of whom are professional musicians, and we're playing like the best of the worst of Leonard Skinner and 38 Special. So it was rough and it was ragged and it was a blast.
Yeah,
It was just so much fun. Um, so it's, for me, it's more who than what.
that makes sense. And so I did cut you off. So continue with why becoming a therapist is what you're passionate about now.
Sure, right. While it's an amazing time to do music, you can literally do whatever you want. Literally anything you could possibly imagine. It's an amazing time to do, but it's an absolutely horrible time to be a professional musician. Um, there are 100 reasons behind that, not the least of which music schools have done too good a job at producing capable, competent graduates. As such, the market is saturated, absolutely saturated with really good, really knowledgeable young players, singers, educators, and they're flipping everywhere.
Yeah.
Go check out the hashtag jazz guitar, just jazz guitar on Instagram. My God, they're everywhere. And it's no longer, and given the digital age that we're in now, it's no longer a problem of Nashville or New York or LA. It's everywhere,
Yeah.
absolutely everywhere, complete saturation. So that makes it challenging. The projected market growth from the Bureau of Labor Statistics is less than 1% growth between now and 2029. Um, and that's like over the entire industry. Music education being a little bit separate, the K through 12 thing is kind of its own arena. But even then, schools are having a hard time passing levies, and music programs are, more often than not the first thing on the chopping block. So
Right.
then there's no security there. God, just the biz is at a really weird crossroads, and it's really, 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 really difficult, more so now than it's ever been. um and as such, like, I don't know, I just can't hang with
Yeah.
that anymore,
What
not as
excites,
full-time person anyway.
yeah. What excites you about therapy and helping people?
The overarching need and ability to share stories, of all things. And here we are.
Yeah.
I took a class in undergrad. So while I majored in music, I minored in religious studies. And I was fortunate to study with a man named Carl Scrady. Um, that's Carl with a C, Scrady, Skrade. He's got a couple books out there. One's called God and the Grotesque. Good luck finding it. If you do find a copy, grab it and be prepared. I've seen used copies going as high as like $200-300. Right. And it's like a paperback this big. It's like,
What?
right. It's just super rare. So, and I happen to have a copy and I did not pay that much money for it. Um,
What's it
but anyway,
about?
it's really turning the whole idea of Christianity and religious thought on its head. So rather than looking for God in the pristine, in the perfect, in the saved by grace, no, you find God down in the muck and the mire and in with the sinners and, the harlots and the charlatans and the heretics and that kind of a thing. And he makes some correlations between this and his other book, Religion and Film. But it's really, for not being a long book. Whew, he goes deep. He goes really quick. It's awesome. But I was fortunate to be able to study with this guy, and whew, just one of his in this class. It was called Story, American Story, Religious Story. Coming back to your question, um, one of his things, his isms, we would be discussing whatever theological or philosophical idea, and well, if this, then this, and well, if this means this, and da, 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 and we'd get to this point where we felt like, yeah, this is the conclusion. And every time, every single time, we would get to that point, and he'd say, okay, that's great. What do you do with that? Like, so challenging, doesn't matter how polished your conclusion is. If you have no intent, if you have no purpose behind it, if you're not doing anything with it, who cares?
Mhm.
Every time. God, bastard, I hated when he did that. But it was so good. Loved
So
it.
can you translate that like to just a person individually in their own life then with like their purpose? And if they have no, I guess if they have no purpose or if there's not enough of a why behind theirs, then the bottom falls out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's God, here we go. Hold on tight. Um, One of my book recommendations, I'll go ahead and make it now. Viktor Frankl, Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor and a psychologist.
Yeah.
And his stories of surviving the camps, and the work he did after, just, my God, mind blowing, amazing book. My copies, I'm letting a friend of mine, wow, that is ironic. I'm letting a friend of mine borrow it, and that friend let me borrow the Dalai Lama's Search for Happiness, and that friend literally just texted me right now. So
Weird.
there, talk about
Trippy.
serendipity, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I apologize for my text chiming in, but Jacob says hi. Um, but within this book, it's all about, he was the godfather of the what's called the existential theory and approach to counseling. So it's about getting inside of looking at your difficulties, looking at your challenges, but determining a reason why, and what is your motivation? Why do you do what you do? That's a large part of why I'm changing careers. Okay, great. I'm playing all these gigs and I'm doing all this teaching, and yay, I can attach university professor to my name. But why? If it's all lateral moves, who cares? What am I really doing? Answer, well,
Yeah.
um, so you can absolutely take this type of philosophical approach, and like I said, it's a part of existentialist counseling theory. It's a whole branch of counseling, or an approach to counseling, I should
Sure.
say, where absolutely sometimes you just have to stop and breathe it in, and what is your why, what is your hope, what is your motivation, why do you do what you do?
So I had asked you, um, what are the top three things that you have found to help the most amount of people, kind of like in your realm? And you had put down ability to listen, wide scope of exposure to individuals and situations, and having an ability to adapt. Expand upon that, please.
Well, as I'm sure you know, there's a difference between active and passive listening. In other words, listening to the person to really hear what they're saying versus listening and just waiting for your chance to reply. The amount of people that engage in active listening and really trying to hear what the other is saying, it's too few and far between,
Yeah.
unfortunately. um, Even with sometimes the best educators or the best therapists or whatever, no, you have to stop and hear what they're really saying. And your ability to adapt, I'll come back to the listening thing. Remind me of my or to tell you about my autistic student, one of my autistic students.
Okay.
One of um, but ability to adapt. The idea that you're going to be good at anything that you do by a singular approach is stupid.
Point blank.
It really is. If you're going to be a successful and effective, let's say, music educator, you have to be conversant, in some history. You have to be conversant in your theory. You have to be conversant in Western art music, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, Tchaikovsky, etc. You would be wise to be conversant in jazz. And you sure as hell better know the popular music and the trends of today if you're even going to begin to connect to today's students, regardless of age. People certainly don't listen to Miles Davis like they used to. So you need to be able to connect with them first on like some Ariana Grande and start to work backwards. And hey, if you like soul, here's Aretha Franklin. Hey, if you like this, here's Les McCann. Well, hey, if you like Les McCann, here's some Miles Davis. It's like hiding the vegetables in the mashed potatoes. And the ability to adapt, you have to have multiple approaches. And even as a future counselor, I'm not going to misrepresent myself. I'm not there yet, but
Yep.
Working my way through grad school, so far so good. Most practicing counselors today operate on an integrative approach, unless they are like a psychologist with a Freudian psychotherapy specialization, which really takes years and years to develop. Most practicing counselors are a multidisciplinary, multi-theoretical. So they're doing some existential, they're doing some Gestalt, they're doing it's mostly coming from a Rogerian humanistic approach. And then even within that, they have at any point multiple techniques and tricks. They can pull from their cognitive behavioral therapy just as much as they can. So it's you have to, the diversity of just the world we live in, you have to have the diversity and approach as well.
Yeah. Hey, do you know anything about I can't remember the acronym. EFT, the tapping, like that stuff?
Oh, very, very little.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I'm forgetting. I haven't quite made it that far yet. I'm just in my theories class, so we haven't made it to techniques yet.
Gotcha.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like the sensory shifting type of theoretical and counseling approach. And it's what I have seen on it, and again, I'm forgetting the acronym as well. It's about letting the person, and this is generalized, do please, dig deeper. But it's, you let the person kind of sink into their deeper, more painful traumas and their memories. But then the idea with the touch is, while they're kind of subconsciously going deep back to that place, then with the touch, you're keeping them grounded in the now, so that they feel like, in so many words, this is oversimplified, but in so many words, then they feel like they've got that safety net. They're going back to look at whatever the trauma was. That technique is used extensively with vets suffering PTSD.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Yeah, so emotional freedom technique, EFT. It's an alternative treatment for physical pain and emotional distress. Yeah. Here's an advert in less than 20 seconds. Did you know that Wellness Provisions offers one-on-one wellness sessions? Yep. So if you're seeking to get healthy and ahead in life, but feeling a little stuck, then book a session and let's get you unstuck. Now, back to the interview. Tell me about the autistic student.
Oh, yeah. So the ability to listen, too often, particularly in the realm of music instruction, particularly at the collegiate level, we get very stuck in our own dogma and methodology and rubrics and bullshit and whatever. So then well, you must be able to play your scales and your chords and your thing and blah. And what do you mean you can't do it? You're out. So this student um, was struggling very much with getting around some scales and doing some different things. And, I tried every pedagogical lick and trick and ism that I knew to do, and it just still wasn't sticking. And I'm like, well, are you practicing enough? Yeah, I'm practicing. Okay, all right. Well, finally,
The tension builds.
seriously. But finally, this student was playing through their scales, and they said, and I was just listening and letting them go, and they were struggling. I'm like, man, okay, all right, fine, whatever. It's another Tuesday, whatever. And the student said, "Oh man, I played the wrong color there." And I was like, "Hang on. What do you mean?" And for me, as the music teacher, thinking in terms of color, like, did he mean like the blue note or whatever, which is also kind of a bullshit term, but that's a whole aside. But thinking like, well, okay, he wasn't playing like that scale degree, any sort of blue note or whatever. So wait a minute, what is this color? And I said, what do you mean you played the wrong color? And then he opened up, and I forget exactly what it was. He said, well, I'm supposed to be playing light blue, but that one was yellow. And I was like, oh, it's like, hang on. It's like, do you see colors when you play? And he said, well, yeah. I was like, and I said, okay. And I just played some chords for him. I was like, what color is this? He said, well, that's like a baby blue. I was like, oh, I said, now what color is this? He said, well, that's more of a lavender thing. I was like, brilliant. I said, how about this color? And he said, well, that's like a light yellow. And I like the sound of that one, but it's funny. I hate the color yellow. And I'm like, oh my God, this is brilliant. So then I told him right then, I said, look, okay, play baby blue. And I swear to God, that minute scales.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Yeah. What's the
yeah,
name for that?
it's a chromostasis.
And I imagine that's not common.
It's rare, but it does happen. Was it the composer? Was it Rachmaninoff? I think a Russian composer that it was either Rachmaninoff or Rimsky-Korsakov that had the same thing, saw colors as they played music. It is super rare. It really is. Um, so with that student, thank God I was listening and getting past just my own bullshit for him to say, oh, well, that was the wrong. I'm like, oh my God, hang on. Do you? He's like, well, yeah. Problem solved. And
Wow.
it was so much fun. He's such a cool dude. Such
That's
a cool dude.
crazy. So here's a question. A lot of musicians feel like they have to like emulate their heroes and, older musicians that have influenced them, often with substance abuse. So like, what's your take on that?
It's bullshit. To get right down to it, you have to understand that many of the musicians that we today view as the masters in whatever discipline, doesn't matter if we're talking about Bill Evans or Mozart, um, many of those musicians were undiagnosed mental emotional health disorders and whatnot. Some were diagnosed, but many were not, and many of them were self-medicating, because even if they were diagnosed, I mean, God, mental health, the entire mental health industry is barely a century old.
Yeah.
We're, mental health counseling, school counseling now developing past, what job do you want to do, Timmy? Like to actually be a very, dare I say, have a little more legitimacy. I hate to say it like that, but now school counselors are dealing with emotions, dealing with, it's a broad spectrum thing. um the entire discipline is so young that, rewind to jazz musicians in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, rewind to, from Bach forward 1750 to,
Right.
1901. Forget it. They were self-medicating because they knew something was off and they didn't know what to do about it.
Mhm.
So, okay, here's heroin, here's alcohol. Oh, absinthe. Okay, sure, why not?
Yeah.
It's the best thing they knew to do. So unfortunately, fast forward to, recent history, too many young musicians hear those stories. And while I'll be the first to acknowledge that, yeah, any of those substances do put you in a different place, do open you up to a different conceptualization and a different experience of your art and your craft, but at the same time, to just, want to go drink yourself silly and do heroin just because John Coltrane did. No, John Coltrane was brilliant because John Coltrane was brilliant. He only did that to slow down his own demons.
Right.
I mean, quite frankly, to get down to the perfect case of John Coltrane, his magnum opus, if you will, A Love Supreme, he recorded that with his quartet after he got clean.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Huh. Do you think, like, do you have tips for really anyone, but we'll say specifically musicians for dealing with like obstacles and adversity and stuff because especially in music, I mean it's huge, like rejection and stuff. And so people don't fall into the trap, whether it's idealizing, substance use or falling into it from rejection. What do you got?
Well, how much time do we have? Um, Rule number one. Um, I lovingly but somewhat tongue in cheek tell my students there are two commandments of Uncle Douglas. One, cover thy ass. Two, handle thy shit. And really, if you can, that will get you a whole long way through a whole lot of things. That being said, the follow up to musicians, you cannot take what we do personally. And that's a really, really hard thing to say and do because so much of what we do is personal art. It means something to us. Even if we're just doing the wedding band circuit, we're having fun playing those tunes and playing with that band, and we're playing for someone's wedding, for God's sake. So it's fun, it's happy, it's meaningful. But you cannot take it personally. Jay Graydon, guitar player, studio musician. You heard him play on Steely Dan's Peg. He was the one that did um, the guitar solo that they chose for the final recording.
Mm.
But he did a great interview years ago, and it's still out there on YouTube somewhere, where he talked about you cannot take it personally. Sometimes you are the right player for the job. I would expand that to say you're the right teacher for the job, you're the right whatever for the job, and sometimes you're just not. Doesn't matter how good you are or are not. And furthermore, if you're not the person for the job, be aware that there are 20 people in line behind you that are really ready, willing, and able to jump on the gig if you can't or you won't.
Mhm.
So you really, as impossible as it can be to try to do, you can't take any of it personally. The industry is a machine, and you have to
Yeah.
run as such.
And I think, I mean, one, like art is subjective, you know? So
Mhm.
just because like if that decision maker doesn't like it, even though all of these people do, it's subjective. And then
Right.
also I think it gives you an opportunity. I mean, if you can have a positive outlook, it can give you an opportunity like, oh, I guess, there are some things I could refine or work on and get better at. And
Mhm.
that's growth, and growth is awesome. And then the next time something comes up, you might be better suited for it because you'll have honed in on some things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, two, allow for that personal development and growth, like you said. Three, take care of yourself. And beyond just, when you're not teaching or you're not on the road or you're not doing the gig, beyond just having your own meditation room when you're at home, when you're out on the road, God, watch what you eat, watch your substance consumption. I'm not going to pretend to be holier than thou and tell you not to. Maybe you don't have three whiskeys, before you get on the plane to go to the next. Um, a stupid little example. I did a very quick flight date down to Florida a couple years back. And it was a lot of fun, but it was intense. It was like a 48-hour fly down, sound check, do the gig, go to bed, flying back the next morning. It was like, sweet Jesus. But that night after we finished the gig, my bandmates and I went out, and of course, the only thing open that late at night in Florida was an Applebee's. And of course, then my friends, well, I'll have this burger, and well, I'll get this. Well, let me get this pasta. And I'm like, y'all, it's 11 o'clock at night. It's like, I'll take like the seafood taco appetizer, please.
Huh?
you know, like, man, you don't have to smash 1,500 calories before you go to bed. Like, come on. Even something as silly as that. I've talked about before, limit your screen time, limit your social media exposure. Um, and that's a difficult thing to do, being in the arts, in the music biz. That's such a key component of self promotion.
Mhm.
So treat it as the tool, as the business thing that it is.
Yeah, dedicated time, this is when you do this. Or
Mhm.
like, I mean, because I have a business, I need social media for my business,
Right.
but on the weekends, I uninstall, like I'll check Instagram on my computer twice a day just to check messages, but I get it off my phone. So there's not that compulsion to just absentmindedly check. And then you get sucked in and it's just, you know, blows your
Absolutely.
mood and blows your day.
Absolutely. My therapist, bless him, one of the coolest things he said to me was like, Doug, sometimes you just have to know when to close the laptop.
Yeah.
And if that didn't hit me like a ball bat, woof, I was like, you, sir, have done this before. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have like tips for people, and again, musicians, people, with managing stress? So like limiting screen time. You mentioned like meditation. Anything else?
Yeah. To get a bit philosophical with making it in the biz, you unless you are deliberately trying to do a tribute or cover band where it's your job to sound like Sly and the Family Stone or Steely Dan or whatever, Miles Davis, you can't get stuck in the details of, do I sound like, or how do I stack up against this musician, or do I sound like them? If you're really trying to do your art and your craft for yourself, do it honestly without any regard for whether or not you sound like whomever. Do what you want to do because it's what you want to do and because it's your honest version of what you're doing. In taking care of self, and speaking to someone that feels like they were drowning, taking care of the self, know when to, not only following the advice of my therapist, know when to close the laptop, but if you're a musician, know when to stop singing, know when to put down the horn, know when to put your guitar back in the case. I'm of the humble opinion that we're not, we in this country are not nearly good enough yet at treating addictions. And this coming from someone who, while I am almost 9 months stone cold sober, for me, it was not because of an addiction. It was just a cleanse challenge that I just decided to keep pushing. I was able to let everything go cold turkey. Thank God, that I'm not an addict. But speaking to the addictive personalities, too often we get people into this position where we help them trade one addiction for another.
Mhm.
So yes, they might not be addicted to heroin or alcohol or pornography or whatever it is anymore, but now they're addicted to religion or physical fitness or music. I know plenty of musicians that treat the making of music as its own addiction. Many are recovering addicts as well.
Mhm.
And however, yes, is being addicted to music better than being addicted to heroin? Of course. However, an addiction is still an addiction. And that can leave you still emotionally, mentally in a very unhealthy space when it comes to the thing that you love to do. So know when to step away from the thing that you're doing. There was a Wayne Shorter quote. I'm going to butcher the quote, but the sentiment of the quote was, uh, music without life is not music, or like music without life is just noise, or something to that effect. And, no one can argue with that coming from someone like Wayne Shorter, one of the masters, still alive to this day, doing and playing and whatever. God bless him. But you have to go and live life. It can't be the one thing all the time.
So
Go, you
having
know,
a balance.
absolutely. Hell, one of America's greater composers of note, Charles Ives, he was an insurance salesman by day. And that gave him the funding and the financial freedom to then write whatever he wanted to.
Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. So yeah, having that balance. What would I say to someone who feels like they're drowning? Your blessing. I want to turn that question on its head a little bit. So someone who's drowning, why are you drowning? What's bogging you down? And first and foremost, keep reaching out. Keep reaching out. I repeat, keep reaching out. Now, to those who are on the other end of it and someone is reaching out to you, as someone who has reached out to no hands present, and as someone who has had those reach out to me, and thank God I was in a position to reach back. um, if you're someone who says, oh man, if you ever need anything and you need to, whatever, man, you reach out and you let me know. Well, then if someone reaches out to you and you don't reach back, fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that very, very deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Be a person of integrity. Do what you say you're going to do, whatever that is. So if you tell someone that you're going to be there for them, and they text you at 11 o'clock at night, I don't care if you have to be up at 5 a.m. to teach your 8 o'clock class, pick up the phone,
Yeah.
you know?
Uh-huh.
Be the person on the other end. Don't
Because
tell someone that you will and then don't. That's
yeah,
just shitty, you
yeah,
know?
and the person who is taking that step to ask for help or to reach out, that's like a massively vulnerable position that they're in. And to then be ignored,
Oh my
like
God.
that's the worst thing you could do to that person. Like they're
Absolutely.
not gonna want to reach out again. They're gonna feel worse.
Right. Right. I already feel like shit. Oh, and now this person's not reaching back to help out. Oh man, forget it. You're absolutely right. Completely agree. But to that person that says they're drowning or feels like they're drowning, don't stop reaching out until you find someone that reaches back. And even if it's something as quote unquote, I don't want to say simple, but even if it's just calling like the suicide hotline or reaching out to an institution or an organization, do that help that you need, whatever it is, wherever it's coming from.
Mm-hmm. Collaborative resource hub with wellness provisions, what we're watching,
Mhm.
there are literally all of those resources in the resources section on the website. Immediate help with hotlines, longer term setup with finding therapists. So those are
Yes.
there.
Yes, and we're finally at this place in our existence as humans where the conversation on mental and emotional health is a real conversation. It's being taken seriously. It's pushing the dialogue forward. So while there is still stigma and we have a long way to go with that whole fight, with all of that work, it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. It's a much more open conversation than it used to be historically. And quite frankly, I don't know if you saw, to make this interview all about me, I don't know if you saw a while ago, I made a post, yeah, in February when I hit my 6 month sober mark.
Yeah,
Um, and I made a
wearing the
very,
suit.
yeah. I made a kind of short but very frank post just about my own, like, hey, I took my stuff seriously. I dealt with suicidal ideations. I was in a toxic relationship. I let my physical health go to shit. I did all of the most wrongest things I could do. When I finally started to hit that mile marker and say, okay, change happens now, the first thing I did, and it's always the stupid little things, because we have this conception of, oh, well, if I'm going to change my life, I need to go run a marathon tomorrow. No. First thing I did, my little entertainment center is sitting right over there. And for the longest time, I've got one of those speaker bars. I didn't go out and buy this. I got it secondhand from a friend. And for the longest time, it was just sitting on the little, just the table right there. And it's designed to be mounted on the wall because it's designed to look cool and be fancy, and who cares? But it was sitting on the table and, it just looked like whatever. And one of the first things I did was finally take that and mount it to the wall.
How did it make you feel after you did that?
Amazing. Just something as simple as I took my speaker to my fucking TV and mounted it to the wall.
You cleaned
That was,
something up.
yeah, yeah. That was my step one in, okay, let's reorganize. And
Yeah.
there were more steps of that. That was in middle April of 2020. And then June 1st, I started working with my trainer. That's Jess Napolitan of Napolitan Fitness. She's a badass MC. We're actually working on her record as we speak. And she's the kind of physical trainer that'll just, woo, listen. If she shows up to your session with the deck of cards, forget it. Forget it. Clear your calendar for 2 days because you'll
Yeah.
feel it.
Yeah.
Started with her in June, and then August 15th decided to just drop the whiskey, drop the weed, just get rid of all of it. It's like, and it was literally a self-dialogue. So you say you don't need this stuff, kid, prove it. And I was like, 30-day challenge, 30 days. If you can't go 30 days, then you need to check yourself in somewhere. 30 became 60, became 90. And that was almost 9 months ago now.
Yeah. And then you have enough momentum behind it that you're feeling good and you want to keep going. Yeah.
Right. And it all fundamentally started because I hung up a speaker.
It represents, it's one tiny aspect that represents your life. If it's disorderly and you're ignoring stuff, you're procrastinating, as soon as you take care of one thing, because it's that irksome, it's always fucking there. You always see it. You're fucking lazy about it. You do. Right. You're just like, game on, motherfucker. Let's go.
Absolutely.
I think also just, again, like for someone, if they feel like they're drowning, journal, get out in sunshine, get out in nature, like give yourself space to breathe.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, I do journaling myself now. For me, that's always been a means of when I feel like I'm getting mentally log jammed, so to speak, then I sit down with the journal and just vomit all over the pages and get it out there. And, at the minimum, it clears my mental space to then deal with, Exhibit A. And then sometimes having that documented totem, not that at all that I dwell in the past, but sometimes it's interesting to look back. Even cars have a rear view mirror. Take a look and just like, okay, where have I come? And then sometimes I look at some of the earlier entries and I'm like, oh my God, that seems like a whole lifetime ago at this point. And in some ways it kind of was. For that, until you're very excited, aren't you?
Puppies.
Right. Because what's an interview without a couple of dogs?
That's right. And God bless the people that are listening to it on a podcast and not seeing the dog in your face right now.
Right. They're missing out.
That's right. So what other book recommendations do you have that can be really worthwhile for someone?
Ooh, I've got a few. So I mentioned earlier the Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I've got a couple others. Show and tell, kids. Show and tell. Come on. Given my religious upbringing, a couple of these coming from that angle. Here's one called An Infidel Manifesto, Why Sincere Believers Lose Faith by a guy named Gary Lanier. Who's Gary Lanier? I'm glad you didn't ask. He's actually a rock metal guitarist turned theologian. So when I was a kid, I was huge into this Christian metal band called Tourniquet, and they're flippin' savage. Their album Vanishing Lessons and the other one Pathogenic Ocular Dissonance, really good metal, like a la Megadeth, early Metallica, complicated thrash style. Like,
really?
Oh my God, yeah, these cats were killing. But Gary Lanier was one of their guitarists. He went between lead guitar and rhythm guitar. And being that he was in a Christian band, he was in the evangelical circles for years and years and years and years and years. And he saw all kinds of shit. So given his experience in the band and seeing those circles, he had a ton of questions. So he went back to seminary and did degrees in divinity and theology. And he then authored this book, Why Sincere Believers Lose Faith. And it's not a huge read, but he outlines quickly all of the errors, inconsistencies in the Christian church, in the Bible itself, he pulls no punches. It's, again, for me, when I found that book at that time and knowing his history with the church and watching him kind of 180 and get a better sense of things. Yeah. And again, this is another one. If you can find it, good luck, but it's a great read. That one. And I actually have it right here. That God and the Grotesque, that Carl Scrady book. Again, if you can find it, but holy crap. Yeah. Robert Persing, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It centers around this man who is a professor, an academic, struggling with many of his own life difficulties, and how this road trip clear across the country is forcing him to confront many of his uh, problems, his difficulties, etc. It's really, really good. It takes a few twists and turns and it kind of centers around a philosophy of, your motorcycle maintenance. The little things you do to take care of your motorcycle can be the little things you do to take care of self. It's really good. It's really, really good. Put this on your list. And the other one, and this feeds into one of my favorite quotes. Brennan Manning, the Ragamuffin Gospel, priest turned, humanitarian, etc., has written a ton of books. A Korean War veteran, so he's seen some. So he Boltman Tillich has seen war, has seen the best of the worst of humankind. And it really, really shaped his theological and philosophical approaches. It challenges the idea that the church too often embodies with this statement of love the sinner but hate the sin, which is just a bullshit means to judge other people. And there, I seem to remember a line in a book that says, "Judge not, lest ye be." But I mean, whatever. But this one challenges that kind of idea in that, if we're agreed that we're going to subscribe to a Judeo-Christian theology, then as such we're all sinners saved by grace. In other words, none of us walk on water, so get over your own shit. And don't make your pursuit of trying to be perfect your end game. Realize that you're always going to fuck up, but it's how you recover from that and you keep moving forward.
I mean, and that's a good point, is like, it also kind of reminds me of like you saying, you looking back on your old journals and, notations and stuff. I read something from Mark Manson, who did The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, that book.
Oh, yeah.
He said, he's like, if you don't look back at your former self, and if you're not disgusted, then you need to figure what the fuck is going on, because you haven't grown and you haven't changed. Like, you should be grossed out by the you from like 5, 10. You need growth, and you're gonna mess up, and that's what facilitates growth.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
completely.
What's your favorite quote?
I have two. One is the tattoo on my left forearm. May all that has been reduced to noise in you become music again. And an anonymous quote I found on the internet 1,000 years ago. And it had been a post-it note on my desk for years and years and years and years. And then finally, December of 2019, I went to get my tattoos, and it served this whole time, even in the midst of me reinventing myself from full-time professional musician to now therapist, counselor. As I'm making that migration, falling in love with the stuff that you love because you love it in the first place. And for me doing, and we're back, for me doing the music thing, it became too much of a paycheck, so it just sucked the joy and the life out of the entire experience for me. Churn out graduates, okay, play another wedding gig, okay, do this. And so it was just a paycheck. So yeah, I really grew to resent it, but this kind of was reminding me, is like, no, you love this stuff for a reason. Find that reason again. And the other one is actually a Brennan Manning quote. And while it speaks to Christians and Christianity, I think it can be universally applicable. The single greatest cause of atheism in the world today are Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and walk out the door and deny him with their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. And again, we're back to that. Be a person of integrity. Do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
If you're going to, claim to love thy neighbor as thyself, well, okay, then stop being a dick in the process.
Do you have any final thoughts or anything, words of wisdoms that you would like to drop on anyone listening?
Nothing so explicit other than just, find your purpose, find your passion, be honest with yourself and what it is that you want to do. Listen a lot, and most specifically, listen to yourself. That whole trusting your gut, following your intuition thing. They weren't kidding.
All right, far out. Thank you for sharing your perspective. This is an interview that I haven't spoken to anyone who, in this regard, coming from the academic side and teaching people music and en route to become a therapist, you've got really cool experiences that just shape your perspective. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's all about sharing the story, right?
That's right. All right. Have an awesome rest of your day.
Thanks. You too.